When you think of the most rigorously structured, hyper-categorized entertainment studios in the early 2000s, your mind probably goes straight to Hollywood.
Oh, absolutely. You think of blockbuster superhero movies or like prestige television. You
Right.
picture executives mapping out these massive 5-year plans.
Exactly. We always default to mainstream cinema when we talk about boardroom mathematics and focus grouping demographics. But today, we are going to look at a machine that was just as massive.
Yeah. And it produced adult entertainment.
Right. And for a lot of people, when they picture that industry, they imagine chaos or something completely disorganized.
But the reality is that some of the most logistically staggering studio operations exist entirely parallel to that mainstream world. Like, you step into the Japanese adult video market, the AV industry in the early 2000s, and you don't find chaos at all.
No, not at all.
You find an industrial complex that operates with like absolute surgical precision.
And that is exactly what we are going to explore today in this deep dive. We're stepping into this incredibly structured world by tracing the career of Ai Kurosawa.
She's the perfect subject for this.
She really is. She was an AV idol who completely dominated this space from 2001 to 2006. We've pulled together industry records, biographical databases, and critical analysis from that era, and the picture they paint is just fascinating.
It really shows an industry driven by the exact same forces of marketing, genre innovation, and technological disruption as any major Hollywood studio.
Right, and it's the perfect lens for us. By looking at her specific trajectory, you, the listener, can actually see the mechanics of the entire industry at work.
Yeah, you see how studios manufacture a brand from scratch, how they navigate these really strict government censorship laws, and eventually how the internet just completely broke their traditional business models.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand how massive and manufactured this studio system is, we have to start with someone who was completely outside of it. And Kurosawa's beginnings are so incredibly normal.
Oh, totally normal.
She was born on December 24th, 1982, in Shiga Prefecture, Japan. And her early life wasn't about theatrical ambitions or, moving to the big city to be a star. It was about sports.
Specifically, high school volleyball. And we really shouldn't gloss over that part because Japanese high school sports are notoriously grueling.
Right, they take it very seriously.
Extremely seriously. It requires immense dedication, physical stamina, and a deep understanding of teamwork and following direction. That athletic background gave her a very natural, robust physique, but more importantly, it instilled a work ethic that would become crucial later on.
But outside of the gym, she was just a regular teenager. I mean, the dashnesses show she loved collecting Sanrio's Hello Kitty merchandise.
Yeah, she was obsessed with Hello Kitty.
And she even mentioned that because she was so intensely focused on volleyball in junior high, she, quote-unquote, didn't have time for boys.
It's a very grounded adolescence. She didn't have her first real intimate relationship until she was 17.
Which is pretty standard.
Exactly. And she later described that relationship as a really positive, eye-opening experience regarding mature connections. It wasn't rushed. It was a very standard, healthy progression into young adulthood.
So eventually, she drops out of high school and starts working everyday service industry jobs. She's waitressing at a coffee shop, she's working at a sushi bar, and this is the point where she gets scouted for the AV industry.
Right.
Now, the official story of why she was receptive to this scouting is wild to me. She supposedly recalled seeing adult entertainment videos in her father's collection, thought the women in them were beautiful, and simply wanted to have pretty pictures taken of herself in that same style.
What's fascinating here is the narrative of personal agency. It completely subverts the traditional, often tragic assumptions society projects onto women who enter this field.
Yeah.
The story suggests she wasn't driven by desperation at all. She was driven by an appreciation for the aesthetic. She just wanted to be beautifully lit and photographed.
Wait, hold on. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Are we completely buying that? Because it's almost like someone seeing a Vogue magazine on their parents' coffee table and saying, I want to be lit and styled like that, except the medium happens to be adult entertainment. It sounds almost too perfect.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It sounds exactly like the kind of focus-grouped, endearing PR origin story a studio would feed to the press to sell the innocent girl-next-door fantasy. Is that the truth, or is that a marketing narrative?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, and it highlights the brilliance of the Japanese idol machine. The truth is likely a blend of both. Did she want to be photographed? Probably.
Right.
But the studios know exactly how to package that desire. In Japanese media culture, relatability is highly monetizable. An origin story about a volleyball player who likes Hello Kitty and just innocently wanted to look like a magazine model, that is incredibly appealing to their core demographic. It softens the taboo.
It weaponizes her normal life.
Exactly. But, having an aesthetic ambition or a great PR story is entirely different from actually walking onto a highly managed production set. The transition from the sushi bar to the studio lot is a massive psychological shift.
Which brings us to April 2001 and her official debut at the Alice Japan studio.
Yeah, her debut.
The release is called Scenery of Love, and they lean heavily into that narrative we just talked about. She plays a college girl moving to Tokyo to be near a man she loves who already has a girlfriend.
It's a full-on romantic drama.
Exactly. And the critics review her by calling her an innocent cutie pie who shines like a jewel.
They are heavily selling the illusion of first-time romance, but behind the scenes, her actual experience of the filming process shatters that illusion immediately.
Right. She admitted she was incredibly nervous. She said the experience was very different than she had imagined, noting she actually expected it to be, quote, more hardcore.
Yeah, she was surprised by the mechanics of it.
But the biggest shock for her was the environment itself. She pointed out that performing intimacy in these videos is fundamentally different than in private life. Because, as she so bluntly put it, you usually don't have people watching you when you're in private.
And that observation right there is the core of the entire industry. It is not raw documentation. It is a highly choreographed performance.
Yeah.
You are surrounded by boom operators, lighting technicians, directors, shouting instructions, and multiple camera angles.
So she essentially points out the ultimate elephant in the room, that performing intimacy for an audience of camera operators is a completely different skill set than actual intimacy. Does this make her more of an athlete or a traditional actress?
It is absolutely a hybrid of both, which is why her volleyball background is so relevant. You need the physical endurance of an athlete to endure a 12-hour shoot under hot studio lights, but you need the emotional projection of an actress to make the consumer believe it's spontaneous and passionate.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
And to understand why this performance aspect is so critical, we have to talk about the primary legal constraint of the Japanese market, which is Article 175 of the Penal Code.
Ah, yes. The censorship laws.
Imagine trying to sell a product where the government legally forces you to obscure the main selling point. Under Japanese law, all domestic adult videos must apply a digital mosaic blur over certain anatomy.
And they enforce that strictly, right?
It is strictly enforced because studios couldn't just rely on explicit visuals. They were forced to innovate. They had to sell the fantasy, the psychology, and the narrative.
That makes so much sense. If you can't show everything, you have to make the viewer care about the context.
Precisely. And the studios recognized Kurosawa's dual capability, her stamina and her acting, immediately. They didn't just leave her in the innocent cutie category. Because of the mosaic blur, the market survives on rapid iteration and hyper-categorization.
Which explains her relentless output.
Yeah.
After her debut, she starts moving rapidly across different competing studios.
Yeah, she was everywhere.
She works with Cosmos Plan, VIP, Atlas 21. And with each release, the marketing deliberately shifts.
They systematically transitioned her brand. They moved away from the innocent college girl persona and started explicitly marketing her physical attributes.
Yeah, they didn't waste any time.
By her third video, the marketing was heavily focused on her specific measurements, her F-cut physique. They used uniquely titled films tailored to capture different, very specific segments of the consumer market. It's basically a masterclass in maximizing a single talent's profitability across multiple demographics.
Before we dive into exactly what those specific segments were, if you're enjoying the vibe, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends. It really helps us out.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. To keep the audience buying DVDs in the early 2000s, before social media algorithms could track your preferences, these studios relied on physical video rental stores.
Right, places like Tsutaya in Japan.
Exactly. And to dominate shelf space, they utilized hyper-specific niche genres. It's essentially world building. It reminds me of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or like video game side quests. It's not just about the physical act, it's about placing the idol into highly specific, fantastical contexts to satisfy very distinct consumer demographics.
The categorization was incredibly granular, and Kurosawa mastered these niches. Let's look at the theatrical side first, which is the massive market for cosplay or costume play.
The studios basically treated her like an action figure. She starred in films where she played a spy, a cheerleader, a nurse, a waitress.
She even dressed up as recognizable anime characters.
There's even a film where she performs entirely in a stuffed animal costume. We're talking titles like Costume Play Doll and Costume Play Maniana 2.
Those genres serve a very specific escapist function. But there is another genre she worked heavily in that is much darker and much more psychologically complex, and that's the mock documentary.
Right. She appeared in a film called Bubbly Heaven, where the premise is just her experiencing professional services. But then the studios push the meta-narrative even further.
Oh, they push it way further.
She stars in Sex Training, where she essentially plays a tortured actress being forced to follow a cruel director's commands, and another called Hypnotic, where the entire premise is that she's been genuinely hypnotized to reveal her deepest hidden desires.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this mock documentary genre is deeply revealing about consumer psychology, especially for the core demographic of early 2000s Japanese salarymen. Critics note that Japanese AVs often mimic documentary styles to create what Nicholas Bornoff called a spontaneous veneer.
Spontaneous veneer, I like that. What exactly does that mean in this context?
It means that audiences crave the illusion of reality above all else. When a viewer buys a DVD from a major studio, their logical brain knows it's scripted.
Right, they know it's a movie.
They know it's a set with a craft services table and a lighting crew, but emotionally, they want to peek behind the curtain. The mock documentary format, the shaky handheld cameras, the fake hypnosis, the simulated behind-the-scenes torture provides that illusion.
It makes them feel like an insider.
Exactly. It allows the viewer to suspend their disbelief and feel like they're watching something raw and unpolished, even though it's just as choreographed as her playing a cheerleader.
That is fascinating. It's the suspension of disbelief cranked up to 100. And amidst mastering all these highly categorized underground niches, she actually manages to cross over into mainstream respected cinema.
Yeah, this was a huge deal.
She co-starred in a mainstream pink film called Lesbian Politicians. And this was directed by Kyoko Aizo, who is widely considered Japan's first hardcore, mature cinema actress.
That crossover is a massive badge of honor. For anyone unfamiliar, pink films have a very unique, respected history in Japanese cinema.
Yeah, give us the breakdown. What separates a pink film from the standard AV studio releases Kurosawa was doing?
Pink films were actual theatrical releases shot on real 35mm film. The studios would give directors incredibly tiny budgets and incredibly tight shooting schedules.
That's stressful.
It was. But in exchange, the directors were given total creative freedom as long as they met a quota of a certain number of intimate scenes per movie. Because of that freedom, pink films became a training ground for some of Japan's greatest avant-garde and mainstream directors. They blend high art filmmaking with adult themes.
So for Kurosawa to be cast by a pioneer like Aizo, it proves she wasn't just viewed as a disposable asset by the AV machine. She was being recognized by industry veterans as a formidable acting talent.
Absolutely. It was critical validation. And that validation quickly spilled over into massive mainstream recognition.
Because by the early 2000s, she's undisputedly at the top of the mountain. In 2003, she wins the Soft On Demand Award for Outstanding Actress,
which is a huge industry accolade.
But the real mind-blower is that she won the Main AV Actress Award at the second Takeshi Kitano Entertainment Awards.
Yeah, that is staggering.
For context for you listening, Takeshi Kitano is a monolithic figure in Japanese media. He's a legendary comedian, actor, and filmmaker. To be recognized at his award show is like the underground world and the mainstream world shaking hands.
It represents the absolute peak of her career. She had conquered the studio system, mastered the niches, and earned the respect of mainstream cultural icons.
Which makes her next career move feel so jarring. In January 2006, right at the peak of her dominance, she retires.
Just walks away.
She completely steps away from the camera to become a live striptease dancer.
It's a pivot to live performance, completely removing the studio apparatus.
But the retirement is brief. Later that same year, she makes a comeback for a studio called Crystallizu. However, it's what she does a couple of years later in 2008 that completely rewrites the rules of the game.
Yes, 2008 is the tipping point, not just for her, but for the fundamental business model of Japanese adult entertainment.
She ventures into a totally new market, the urban market. Now, this is the uncensored frontier. We talked earlier about Article 175 and the strict mosaic blurring laws that govern the domestic studios.
Right, the digital blur.
Kurosawa bypasses this entirely. She begins starring in videos without the mosaic blur, which were strictly targeted at international markets and underground sales, via digital online platforms like XVNJP.
It is impossible to overstate how disruptive this was. Think of it like the music industry's Napster moment.
I love that analogy. Break that down for us.
So for decades, the entire Japanese AV industry, the censorship laws, the Tsutaya video rental shelves, the mock documentary marketing, was all built on the physical limitations of VHS tapes and DVDs.
Because they were physical objects.
Exactly. The government could enforce the mosaic blur because they could regulate physical objects sold within Japan's physical borders. But the internet completely obliterated those borders.
Right. A server hosting a video doesn't care about Japanese domestic law if it's broadcasting to a global audience.
Yeah. Exactly. Kurosawa's pivot to the Eurobond market was a realization that there was a massive untapped international audience that had zero interest in the mosaic blur. Digital platforms provided the exact infrastructure needed to completely bypass the legacy studio system and domestic physical retail constraints.
So what does this all mean? She leaves at the top of her game, but when she comes back, she totally bypasses the traditional Japanese censorship system. Is this move in 2008 a calculated, shrewd business decision, a political rebellion against censorship, or is she just adapting to survive the internet age?
It's pure adaptation. The traditional studios, with their perfectly color-coded genres and strict domestic legal compliance, suddenly found themselves competing with the borderless, decentralized, uncensored internet.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. Kurosawa, who started her career playing an innocent, heavily managed college girl on a tightly controlled studio set, evolved into a pioneer of this decentralized digital frontier. She moved exactly as the medium moved.
It really is an incredible, almost whiplash-inducing trajectory to trace. Let's bring this all together for you, the listener. We've taken a journey today from a high school volleyball player collecting Hello Kitty merchandise to an idol navigating the bizarre, psychologically complex worlds of anime cosplay and mock documentaries.
Yeah, quite the journey.
And finally, we watched her become an award-winning pioneer who skirted international digital censorship lines. It proves that even the most taboo shadow industries are driven by the exact same boardroom math, marketing innovation, and technological shifts as the mainstream media we consume every single day.
It's a perfect mirror for broader media consumption, and this raises an important question, one that extends far beyond the early 2000s AV industry. We talked about the spontaneous veneer.
Right.
The idea that a highly regulated, censored industry had to rely on shaky cameras, mock documentaries, and fake hypnosis to make a manufactured fantasy feel raw and real to its consumers. What does that say about the reality we consume on everyday social media platforms right now? Are today's everyday lifestyle influencers, with their perfectly lit get-ready-with-me videos and staged, candid moments, just using a modern digital version of the spontaneous veneer to sell us a perfectly curated fantasy?
Oh, wow. That is such a sharp point. We might not be talking about the adult entertainment industry anymore, but that highly categorized, perfectly focused grouped Hollywood studio lot we talked about at the very beginning, it hasn't disappeared at all.
Not even a little bit.
It's just decentralized. It moved from the boardroom directly to our smartphones, and the illusion of reality is still the most profitable product on the market. Definitely something for you to mull over the next time you scroll past a supposedly spontaneous behind-the-scenes video. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.